And so it's now my pleasure to invite Ms. Tientip Supanid, Chief, Financing for Development Section, Macroeconomic Policy and Financing for Development Division, to take the floor and introduce this agenda item. Ms. Tientip, please.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the first session of the Committee on Macroeconomic Policy, Poverty Reduction, and Financing for Development. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce Agenda Item 4, Strengthening Finance for Sustainable Development in Asia and the Pacific. The objective of these sessions are to invite the committee to discuss and deliberate on the contents of the Secretariat Note E/ESCAP/CMPF1/4 and to seek guidance from the committee on future focus and priorities of the Secretariat in assisting member states in strengthening finance for sustainable development in the region. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as the name of our Committee on Macroeconomic Policy, Poverty Reduction, and Financing for Development implies, I would like to emphasize that this is the first session of the committee that has financing for development element to it. I am therefore very pleased to inform you that ESCAP has now formally institutionalized financing for development work within our organization. As the Secretary General of the UN rightly said, to achieve sustainable development goals, we need a much stronger focus on financing for development. Promoting financing for development is therefore critical for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in our region. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to inform you that ESCAP's strategy on financing for development is based on the idea that regional knowledge exchange platform, policy advocacy, and research products were the key to expanding and improving finance in Asia and the Pacific. Over the past 4 years, ESCAP has conducted broad-based consultations which have contributed to developing a regional vision on financing for development. These include, for example, improving public finance and tax policy, increasing private sector engagement in infrastructure financing, and boosting financial inclusion for small and medium enterprises. The choice of these topics reflects Asia-Pacific's enormous challenges in financing its rapid urbanization, ambitious infrastructure initiatives, and the societal environmental spending that is necessary to effectively pursue the 2030 Agenda. ESCAP work on financing for development has followed 4 main tracks. First, promoting broad regional FFD cooperation and high-level consultations. Second, prioritizing research on the selected priority areas for Asia-Pacific. Third, providing policy advice and capacity building for member states. And fourth, promoting expert networks and, of course, partnerships. Since 2014, ESCAP has promoted broad regional cooperation through an annual high-level dialogue on financing for development in Asia and the Pacific, which has emerged as the most inclusive platform in the region for knowledge exchange, policy debate, and consensus building. More than 70 ministers and central bank governors, and some 700 high-level officials and experts from almost all ESCAP member states, and more than 20 leading organizations has participated in the 4 events up to now. Research and in-depth analytical studies have been a focus of ESCAP work on financing for development since the beginning. Over the past 4 years, ESCAP produced an overview report on financing for development in Asia-Pacific countries. More than 30 analytical papers and country studies, and a similar number of shorter pieces as policy briefs and notes. Building on these research products, ESCAP has provided advisory service and delivered numerous capacity building activities in the region. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, going forward, we would like to continue to strengthen our advisory services in the priority financing for development areas through networks and collaboration with multilateral and national stakeholders. And at the same time, focus on translating its policy research and knowledge products into policy manuals and training materials that are ready to be used by policymakers, UN country teams, and partner institutions. In particular, our planned future focus of FFD works include, first, a regional platform for knowledge exchange and peer learning. We plan to continue to strengthen our regional cooperation on FFD for exchanges of substantive knowledge and peer learning, and to enhance engagement with partner organizations and other stakeholders. And to better align our work on financing for development with the existing mandates and platform, we will synchronize our high-level dialogues on financing for development with the Committee on Macroeconomic Policy, Poverty Reduction, and Financing for Development. Second is research and knowledge products. In the 2018-2019 biennium, we plan to continue to strengthen our policy research on the thematic areas of focus. More attention will be devoted to country case studies to monitor and better leverage regional experience. Third is policy advocacy and capacity building. These will consist of activities such as workshops and dissemination of best practices and unique regional lessons, as well as issuing operational policy guidelines. We will also engage in regional capacity building support and policy advocacy to selected countries. Last, and the most important, is partnerships and expert network with other organizations and business sectors. As the regional lead voice and think tank of the UN development system, we would contribute substantive inputs on regional FFD progress, priorities and policy issues to the ECOSOC Forum and the IATF annual report on FFD follow-up. Continue organizing workshops and events to communicate the Asia-Pacific voice and facilitate the communication at the global level back to Asia-Pacific to support regional financing for development follow-up. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, today I count on your insights and perspective to guide our work on financing for development in the right direction. I believe that to effectively mobilize finance for sustainable development, member states should be in the driver's seat, with ESCAP as a supporting force. For this, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for all your past cooperations, and I really look forward to continue to work with you to leverage financing for our common goals of sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Ms. Tientip Supanid. And now may I invite His Excellency, Mr. Nim Dorji, Finance Secretary, Ministry of Finance, Bhutan, to moderate the session along with his distinguished panelists.
Thank you, Chair. To introduce the agenda item this afternoon, we'll have a panel on the strengthening finance for sustainable development in Asia and Pacific. As for Addis Action Agenda, strengthening financing for development is necessary for implementation of 2030 Agenda. To discuss this very important agenda, I would like now to introduce the distinguished panelists that will speak at this panel this afternoon. I'm delighted to have with us Mr. Wan Chuan, former Deputy Prime Minister and Treasurer, Australia, and Chair of the ESCAP Eminent Expert Group on Tax Policy and Public Expenditure Management. I also have Mr. Jiang Ziping, Director General, China PPP Center, Minister of Finance, China. Then Mr. Asteria Primanto Vakti, Chief of Financial Education and Training Agency, Ministry of Finance, Indonesia. Then Mr. Shoang Shin, Chairman, Council of International Finance Corporation, Republic of Korea. To allow sufficient time for this very important discussion, and taking into account that we have 4 speakers, I would like to kindly request the speakers if they could limit their remarks to 7 minutes. I would like to now invite His Excellency Mr. Wan Chuan, former Deputy Prime Minister and Treasurer, Australia, and Chair of the ESCAP Eminent Expert Group on Tax Policy and Public Expenditure Management, to make presentation, which may be useful for our deliberation under Agenda Item 4. Mr. Chuan, you have been a leading advocate for forward-looking tax reforms and tax corporations in Asia and Pacific region. With ESCAP, you currently chair the Eminent Expert Group on Tax Policy and Public Expenditure Management, which contributes expert guidance and technical know-how to ESCAP's work on the subject. In your engagement with Asia-Pacific countries and various multilateral organizations as a public finance expert and as a former senior policymaker, what do you feel are the most pressing issues regarding tax and public finance policies in the region, and how can ESCAP, as a regional think tank and a broad-based intergovernmental platform, better support its member states in their effort? Mr. Wan Chuan, please.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much for that introduction. If we're going to have any opportunity and chance to fully achieve the ambitions for the Sustainable Development Goals, then we have to build strong, efficient and progressive tax systems. We have to have a revenue stream which is going to drive the necessary investment in health and education that we all desire. And to do that, then we really do need to lift our tax take, that is the tax to GDP ratio, which across our region is very low. The IMF has done research which shows that you can have a fairly sharp increase in growth if you can lift your tax systems above that 12 to 15% of GDP. But that will only occur if we get the settings correct. It's absolutely clear to our eminent expert group that we across the region need to build our tax capacity. We need to build a strong tax culture. Also, we need to have much more coordination and cooperation in the region, and we also need to avoid a nasty race to the bottom when it comes to tax rates. Because I've only got 7 minutes, I'm going to make 7 points. Firstly, about building a strong tax culture. Building a strong tax culture needs enthusiastic support from the political and bureaucratic leadership in a country. We know as a matter of political economy that when authorities seek to either lift taxes or make their tax systems more compliant, they frequently run into powerful vested interests who seek to thwart those objectives. So it's important for political leadership to be determined in what it's doing and to have a plan to do it. And we all know that people will not necessarily accept tax increases or changes in compliance if they see in their society other people, say wealthy individuals or large corporations, that are avoiding their responsibilities. So the most important thing over and above strong leadership and having a plan is also to garner public support, strong public support behind the proposals that authorities are seeking to legislate and to implement. And of course, the public will not support changes in tax unless they're seen to be fair as well as efficient. So it's important to have a plan. It's also important to back that plan with strong public support. Thirdly, when this is being done, transparency is very important. Transparency in the tax system about who pays and who doesn't pay can be very powerful in shifting public perceptions and support in the community. In our country, we have tax transparency legislation that forces corporations to publish their total income, their total taxable income, and the total tax paid. That has changed the debate in our country and has made it easier for governments to put in place effective compliance and other tax reforms. It's also pretty important to link revenue measures to policies which are popular in the community, particularly policies in health, education, and perhaps in the area of environment. So making that link between the revenue and the service that people receive is critical. It's also important that the monies raised through tax are seen to be spent efficiently and effectively, and if there is obvious waste and mismanagement in the system, that will diminish the public appetite for tax change. And of course, frequently in tax, if you're contemplating new taxes that have not been implemented before, it's not always the first best policy that succeeds. You may have to stage the implementation of a tax policy to make sure you get the necessary support. And lastly, I think you need to avoid a race to the bottom. I think what we do need in the region is a healthy regional culture, which means that we might have healthy regional competition, but we should avoid a race to the bottom, which ends in beggar thy neighbour policies, and everybody loses in those situations. So what we can see has been happening in the region, as indeed as it has been happening around the world, is that the tax bases, particularly the corporate tax bases, are being eroded by both lower rates as well as exemptions and loopholes. Now, lower taxes can well be a legitimate reform which will bring benefits, but when they turn into beggar thy neighbour policies, they are not reform. They are the antithesis of reform. So we've got to avoid protectionist tax policies at all costs. And I know my Indonesian colleague here feels strongly about that as well, as do many other countries in the region. And it takes me to the third point. There is now an increasing concentration in the region of a large amount of capital from here and around the world in tax havens, and that is an indication of a big problem in the region that we need to deal with on a regional basis. But what we also know is that, as in the developed world, where inequality has become rampant, we are now beginning to see growing inequality, and have been seeing for some time growing inequality in the Asian region. Between 1995 and 2015, 75% of advanced economies experienced a greater than 2-point increase in their Gini coefficient. In the Asia-Pacific region, that was 50%. So there has been a marked deterioration in levels of inequality in the Asian region, particularly since 1990. And this tells me that, unfortunately, we are beginning to see a pattern that we've had in the developed world, which in itself is leading to a hollowed-out middle class in many of those countries and great armies of working poor, beginning now potentially to be repeated across our region. And that is yet another reason why we need strong regional cooperation. Because the truth is, if you look at so much of the material now produced by the IMF, that countries will grow more strongly if they grow more fairly. What this means is that we need a judicious mix of tax policies which make the system in total progressive, rather than becoming more regressive as tax systems have consistently around the developed world for some time. So what is the sort of policy preference or the policy mix in tax that we need in the region? Well, what we've seen in the developed world is that where there has been progressive tax systems which have been associated with targeted transfer payments, that has had a marked impact on inequality and made those societies far fairer. We need in our region, depending on our level of development, a similar mix of policies which can deal with growing inequality in the region. So the eminent expert group which I have been chairing has been discussing all of these issues, and recently the Secretary-General of the United Nations made the point that he wanted to see the regional organisations take a greater role in the coordination of both policy and administration. In the area of tax, for example, we don't have a regional-wide meeting of tax commissioners such as they do in other regions. SAGATA is the principal regional tax organisation which only covers around a third of the region. I think it would be important for an organisation like ESCAP to work with countries in this room to ensure there was a far more thorough regional approach to tax administration, which brought all of the key people together to exchange information and coordinate our activities. The Secretary-General also talked about the need for a platform for best practices in the area of taxation. Well, our eminent expert group has been dealing with that, and I think it's a legitimate area for us as a region to have a regional view about what we might do in terms of the tax mix for small to medium enterprises, or what we might do in the region that is distinctive in dealing with transfer pricing. It's up to countries in this room to determine the sorts of priorities that they would have for regional coordination as a matter of priority. And I think that will come out of meetings such as this. And of course, as I said before, play a role in coordinating capacity building across all of our countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swan. You have strongly highlighted the need for building tax culture, political leadership, and also importance of tax as in resources for strengthening and achieving sustainable development. Raising taxes is a challenge in developing countries like Bhutan, where we need public support and also linkage with policies like health and education, which Mr. Swan has very clearly highlighted the need for such linkage. Achieving the Sustainable Development Goal would require strengthening domestic finances, wherein the tax is the core of domestic financing. So therefore, this is very important. Thank you, Mr. Swan. It is now my pleasure to invite Mr. Jiangping, Director General, China PPP Center, Minister of Finance, China, to make the presentation. Your country, Mr. Jiangping, your country has experienced impressive surge in PPP projects over the last 5 years, with more than 10,000 projects in the pipeline for a total value of around $2 trillion. How do you explain such positive development, and what would be your recommendation for other countries? How could countries better learn from each other and exchange best practices to promote sustainable infrastructure development? Could you please explain why you think a network of PPP units and infrastructure specialists could be beneficial for countries in the region? Mr. Jiangping, please.
First, I want to give some brief instruction about why the Chinese market is booming in these years. I think PPP concept is not new things for China. In 1980s, China have applied some duty and concessional model in China, but the PPP is only designed as a financial tools managed by various directors. So there is low top design, elected top design serves low booming market. So since 2013, China initiated the new round of reform. There has 4 pillars focus. First, the rule of the law. Everybody must abide by the law, including government and private partners. Second, transformation of government function. Government must transform the limited government. Let the market make decision role in the electoral research. Second, we are more focused on the top, from the top to bottom design. So in terms of Chinese experience, I think the central government political commitment is very important. Besides this one, I think there is 4 very important factors. Fourth is creating a systematic framework network. In China, we set up a 5-layer regulation framework, including law, dedicated policy, operation guidelines, contract, and output performance indicators. Second, I think institution capacity is very building, including both public partners and private partners, such as setting up the PP unit at the central level and the local level, training program, pilot program, and the third-party consulting agents, and the information disclosure in the whole life cycle of project. The third is the emulation of business model, which can make a project sustainable commercially and financially in the long-term run, such as successful TOD model at the Hong Kong Light Railroads. In China, industry park model and the EOD model, environment-oriented development model, are very welcomed by the local government. First, I think infrastructure is the public goods, so government must have strict administrative supervision, such as at the file procurement procedure, contract execution, performance payment mechanism, and the performance assessment. So PPP in the first years, PPP is innovative, institutional, and mechanism driver for the new development. I think most ESCAP members are emerging countries. They are almost at the same development stage to China. China will be share of license practices with other states at the ESCAP levels. I think how in the new era, globalization is the main driver for emerging countries, because we can leverage more intellectual resources to push forward our domestic image. So if I have some suggestion for the development force, we must be improved, open, and reform national agenda. Second, I think we be set up a friendly investment environment. So at this era, I think a sound systematic regulation framework is very important. Second is how to implement the capacity building, such as central level must be set up the database of the pipelines, because if we have a database lines, we can even more ease to the project, let the investor what is government want to do, what is the priority, what is potential demanded for the market. Third, I think because the reform is a tough task for the government, but how to let more people to support our agenda, I think set up the pilot program is very important. Pilot program will help us find a efficient path to find a replicable, expandable model to put forward our regime agenda. Third point I want to share with you is I think in ESCAP countries we are faced the same challenge. We are shortage of infrastructure, shortage of the public goods. But how to collectively address this challenge, I think international cooperation is a very effective very efficient solution. ESCAP is an intergovernmental platform, so I think ESCAP take lead to set up the PP network for the project financing as it's very important. How to make the network as ESCAP more useful for the member countries? I think I suggest the network should play the third roles. First is, I think, coordinate members' policies, because different countries have different governance model, different policy. But if you want to set up the international united and open PP market, so we must coordinate the individual countries' policy is very important. Second, I think the PPP model is an innovative tools. It's a complicated system, so including governance, management, financial resource, capital market. So the platform, how to share the knowledge, how to share the knowledge and the practice is very important. Third, I think because how to meet the 2030 SDG goals, I think action is very important. So as we first set up PP network, we hope ESCAP can set up a database of pipelines. Let's the international investment, including China investment, who is the member country priority, where is the potential project. So in China's experience, China's PPP sent a database nationwide. A private partner, public partner, and the international investors can have easy to access to the pipeline. So it's very important. It's a very important lesson for us. I think it's my order. We have signed a MOU with ESCAP in November. I think China PP Center will mobilize more financial resources to support ESCAP network to work smoothly. I think there is a larger news to tell you, because ESCAP member states is almost similar to the BRI countries. In the last 4 years, China has invested 40 and 60 billion US dollars in the BRI countries. In the last 4 years, China has 400 to 600 billion US dollars to outbound investment. I think most will be as BRI countries. So in the ESCAP development, in structural development strategy, China investors will take lead to investment potential countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Xiongping, for sharing your experiences and the success stories China has achieved in implementing PPPs, establishment of PPP unit, simplifying regulations, and using private sector investment to achieve public sector infrastructure. These experiences and your suggestions for the ESCAP countries in terms of moving forward will be very useful. So thank you very much. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Astera Primanto Vakti, Chief of Financial Education and Training Agency, Minister of Finance, Indonesia, to make a presentation. Indonesia is a representative developing country in the region, which not only faces domestic revenue mobilization pressure to support national development agenda and sustainable development, but also needs to address external tax challenges in an open economy, such as transfer pricing and tax competition. For countries like Indonesia, what support from multilateral organizations and development partners would be most valuable? So what is your perspective on regional tax cooperation, and why is it so important? Mr. Bhakti, please take the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. I will start with the fact in Indonesia. So I just echo the presentation from our colleague from Australia that I just show that based on the fact, Indonesia is almost the same like other emerging countries. So the tax ratio is around 10 something, yeah, but we trying hard, yeah, to make a substantial reform, yeah, to achieve more tax ratio in the near future. And other than that, we also have foreign direct investment and also domestic investment in Indonesia. If we look at the number, yeah, for FDI, the blue one, it seems that the number is always increasing, yeah, but the domestic investment also increasing. But the pace of the growth is almost the same. So we still have a problem how to attract the investment. And also we have to look at the commodity price here. If you look at the price of oil and coal, natural gas, and also we try to put tea price here just to look at the comparison. In general, the price is still flat. Yeah, so we are facing a problem in the price of the commodity for a certain period of time. That's why that our revenue also have a problem because of that. And if we look at the growth, yeah, right now in 2017, the prediction is 5.05, yeah, so we have to look at the zoom or the sector that have a very substantial contribution for that. Then it is also confirmed that the digital economy is the most attractive sector for that. If you look at this chart, so for ICT, information and communication, the growth for this year is 9.8%, yeah, and the second one is MNC, so multinational company services. So after that, we can understand what kind of cooperation among the country, yeah, using multilateral and also bilateral that we can have. And if we are talking about transfer pricing, yeah, I think this is three big company, yeah, Starbucks, they didn't pay corporate tax while the scoring sales, yeah, certain very substantial, Google, Amazon, and others company. This is 2011, and right now I think they have more and more. And transfer pricing, I think this is not a sin, yeah, but I think we have to have a cooperation hand in hand to diminish the impact of the transfer pricing, and our ministry is very keen to look at this problem very seriously. And tax competition, yeah, tax competition also the problem for a country like Indonesia, because when we are talking about FDI, everybody always asking about sweetener, and this the easiest factor that they usually asking is tax incentive. If we are not have a very conservative or very comprehensive approach for that, so we will race to the bottom. So we try to look at this more detail, because it will also impact for the revenue for the country. And the other external challenge, as I mentioned earlier, we will have a multinational corporation, and then after that they will make a global transaction. And the first issue that we should face is base erosion and profit shifting. Yeah, base erosion, profit shifting, especially in transfer pricing, that I has already said before, is the most important thing that we have to deal with. And other than that, transparency issue. And right now, even though based on the initiative under OECD. Many countries are considered as pass the test for the transparency, but many papers also come into the hot issue right now. Yeah, after Paradise paper, I don't know, maybe whether there are many other papers, and it shows that tax haven is still the problem for many countries. And by having those kind of facts, so we can have at least three factors here for the challenge: slow down economy, growth, and then trade protection. Yeah, every country just try to have their own product and in their own country, and also stagnation of the commodity price. And in the domestic, the country usually have a very limited base for taxation, and compliance also is not adequate, and support for IT, yeah, to make the administration easier also sometimes still have a problem. And the most important thing, sometimes the country is not have a support for law enforcement. The impact of that will be in the revenue, so the revenue will shortfall. And having that kind of condition, Indonesia tried to use two avenues. The first one of the reform is having international cooperation, yeah, with the multinational organization like World Bank, IMF, OECD, IPAC, and also ESCAP here. We try to have capacity building and tax reform and also benchmarking. We are usually trying to talk about the comparison between one country to another, and we try to find the best fit, yeah, for our country. And for the bilateral organization, the cooperation usually cover the data exchange, yeah, between the countries. So if someone buy luxury watch in other countries, so Indonesia can have the data, and we can trace where is the location or the ID, tax ID, and then look at the income, yeah, just to look at the fairness. And then dispute resolution, because having many transfer pricing, so we have to have the international standard for dispute resolution. And also the most important thing is the new standard of BEPS. This is not easy, yeah, easy to discuss, easy to talk, but the implementation is very, very hard, because we need more discussion, persuasion, and also the same interpretation. Yeah, I think by having ESCAP here, we can use ESCAP to bring this issue, yeah, to be more implementative agenda. Yeah, for example, if we are only talking about the administration issue, we usually only talking about how we tax and how we tackle using the administration. But having the policy dialogue or macroeconomic dialogue, so we can look at the problem more comprehensive. So I think the role of ESCAP in this region is very, very important. And other than that, I think we also have the regional forum like ATAIC, ASEAN Forum Taxation, and also SGATAR, but most of the issue, they usually only talking about sharing knowledge and try to have a policy harmonization. That's why that we really need, yeah, to have more strong standard. Yeah, so we are not only talking about the cooperation, but also how we operate the cooperation, and this is very important. Yeah, for example, for BEPS, yeah, right now based on the data, yeah, most of the problem is connected with transfer pricing and digital economy. So how we can deal with that? Yeah, I think if we can exchange the information and also exchange view regarding this issue, so every country have the same understanding and the same position. After we have the same understanding and same position, so the government can have harmonized regulation. That's why that the policy coordination and also discussion like what ESCAP doing right now is very, very important. So other than that, we also have the tax reform. Yeah, in Indonesia, we try to reform almost everything, starting from the organization. Yeah, we try to create mobile tax unit and piloting micro tax office and the other office. So the office will be transformed into the new office. Yeah, and then the second one, human resources. This is the most important asset in our reform. So we try to make a clearer rule in job rotation, enrichment, career path, remuneration, and others. And other than that, we introduce functional structure. The third issue, we'll try to establish our better IT and database system. So right now in Indonesia, we use almost everything electronically. So your tax return can be filed by electronic, and you can pay by e-billing system, and then we have also virtual assistant and live chatting. Yeah, the form also electronic and other electronic issue. So we're trying hard to make the new development, yeah, the dynamic of the economy into our office using IT. And also we try to establish core tax system. This is the most important thing. Yeah, so we try to look at from end to end, yeah, starting from the registration until how we can use this data. And also we try to have joint audit and database cleansing. Other than that, the fourth one is business process. Yeah, we try to have more internal control, clearance process, and reorganization based on the best fit for our organization. And the last one is legal framework. Actually, this is more on the policy matter, but we try to asking engagement from the business. So we are asking the support from the Chamber of Commerce, yeah, what we call Kadin in Indonesia, and also international organization for the reform. And other than that, we try to make a more clear codification of tax regulation. And for the cooperation, if I may share with you, we have many cooperation, yeah, like SGATAR and ASEAN Forum Taxation, double tax agreement, and also for EOI, we also have a new regulation and new law that giving the power to the government to look at the data from the bank, yeah, and other exchange of information. And for the BEPS, we try to have the minimum standard for BEPS. So in this opportunity, I will also asking support from other country, yeah, to have harmonization in this BEPS. For the future development, we try to have more international best practice for transfer pricing, and then also for the dispute resolution and implementation of automatic exchange of information. Other than that, we try to look at the opportunity to have a single tax ID, not only in the country, but also maybe in the region. Yeah, we start the discussion under the ASEAN Forum on Taxation. Yeah, but until right now, we're still waiting the response from other countries. Other than that, we also try to look at very careful for the incentive, because we don't want to have a harmful tax competition. And the last one is capacity building. So Indonesia also welcome, yeah, to give a capacity building for other country that need the issue that is having many similarities with our country. So I think we can also have cooperation with other multinational organizations. I think this is the issue that I want to share with all of you. Thank you. Back to moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Bhakti, for sharing a comprehensive presentation on the major reforms initiated by the government of Indonesia, and especially focusing on transfer pricing, digital economy, and various means of enhancing revenue collections, especially international cooperation in transfer pricing continues to be very important. We see lots of experiences that can be emulated, and international cooperation in tax can be deepened. So thank you very much. Now, I'd like to invite Mr. Song-Seon Shin, Chairman, Council on International Financial Cooperation, Republic of Korea, to make a presentation. The Republic of Korea has vast experiences in supporting its small and medium enterprises to access sources of finance, and other countries in Asia and Pacific can learn much from this experience. Could you give us a brief overview of policies and regulations in Republic of Korea that have contributed to enhance access to finance by SMEs? Which of these policies and regulations have been, in your view, most significant? Your organization has a mandate to expand global financial cooperation, including by supporting exchange of financial knowledge and best practices with partner countries. How can CIFC support ESCAP member countries interested in improving access to finance of their SMEs? Would your organization be interested in partnering with ESCAP and other organizations to support the preparation of detailed studies in a number of countries in this regard? Mr. Shin, please take the floor.
Thank you, Moderator. Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and ladies and gentlemen. I am Song-Hwan Shin, Chairman of CIFC, and at the same time, the President of KIF. CIFC is an international network platform for financial companies, and KIF is a think tank in the areas of economic and financial policies. And in a way, KIF is a research arm of CIFC. My talk will be in three parts. First, a brief overview of SME financing programs and challenges, and I'll briefly touch on CIFC. Before I go into the details of SME financing programs in Korea, I must say that SMEs, the importance of SMEs cannot be overemphasized, because this is what most people live on. In Korea, in terms of number of companies, 99% of companies are SMEs. And in terms of employment, about 75 to 85% of employment is happening in SMEs, depending upon the exact definition of SMEs. SME financing programs in Korea can be categorized in 5 groups: credit guarantee, direct lending, on-lending, venture capital investment, and startup financing. Different institutions undertake different roles. In credit guarantee area, CODIT and KTFC are conducting major roles. And in direct lending, SBC and Industrial Bank of Korea are playing a major role. And on lending, our central bank, which is Bank of Korea, and our state-owned bank, which is Korea Development Bank, are participating. And in the areas of venture capital investment, the public fund, which is Korea Venture Investment Corporation, is playing a role. And currently, one of key policy issues in Korea is how to facilitate the financing needs of the startup companies. Under the current administration, the former Small and Medium Business Administration was promoted to the ministry level, Ministry of SMEs and Startups. In Korea, SME financing programs have grown by 4% on average per year since 2009. Credit guarantee program takes the biggest part, followed by KDB on-lending program. Out of total SME loans, the proportion of public SME financing is about 16%, which is not a small number. Internationally, Korea is one of a few countries that have more venture investments in 2015 relative to those in 2007. About 25 to 30% of venture capital investments are supported by public programs. The size of SME financing programs in Korea increased much in the period of economic difficulties, especially in response to 1998 Asian currency crisis and 2008 global financial crisis. As the supply of private sector credit tightened during the crisis period, the increased financing gap of SMEs was filled by public SME financing programs. For your information, I would like to tell you that Korea is probably one of the biggest public SME financing programs relative to GDP. For example, Korea has the second largest credit guarantee programs relative to GDP, which is about 6% next to Japan. Obviously, I'm not telling that this large size of SME financing programs is good or bad. I just want to emphasize that Korea is allocating a lot of resources and efforts in SME financing programs. As I previously mentioned, one of our key policy issues is how to improve the accessibility of startup capital, because data show that startups and early-stage SMEs still experience financing gap. The graph shows the accessibility to expansion capital and startup capital from international perspective. Korea belongs to the good accessibility group for expansion capital, but to below average group for startup capital. Next, I turn to challenges. The objective of SME financing programs is to help level the playing field for SMEs while not disturbing or nurturing market-based SME ecosystem. I'm saying this because one of common mistake of SME programs is disrupting the SME ecosystem due to misallocation of resources within SME ecosystem. Having said so, we have been constantly modifying our SME financing programs to better achieve the objective mentioned before. Our efforts are in three folds. The first, mandates and program design. We constantly try to make the mandates clear so that we can have more objective evaluation of the programs. Also, we try to improve the design of the programs so that incentives of relating parties, which are recipients, public institutions, government, and private institutions, are better aligned. Second, we constantly try to improve the efficiency of program execution. Because we have various public institutions, coordinating roles and responsibilities of them is a key to efficient execution. Last but not the least, performance evaluation is critical in improving the design of the programs and efficiency of the execution. We constantly try to identify the areas where performance is high or low, and to meet new demands such as new technologies and sustainable investments. The CIFC was established in 2013 and has been in existence for 4 years. And this is a coordination platform for international financial cooperation of key financial market players and regulatory authorities around the globe CIFC assists our member institutions to share financial knowledge, experiences, and best practices with partner countries for building a stable and robust financial system. And we will continue to enhance our networking capacity. CIFC absolutely is interested in partnering with UN ESCAP member countries. And in fact, over the past 4 years, CIFC has cooperated with more than 50 countries around the world. And our cooperation with UN ESCAP member countries can be in three major activities. First, knowledge exchange initiative that CIFC has right now. KEI, knowledge exchange initiative programs, invite financial authorities from emerging economies to provide networking grounds with CIFC member institutions and share their best practices and experiences. And second, International Financial Forum. Every year, CIFC hosts or co-hosts with our partners international financial forums. And just before I came here, we had fourth International Financial Cooperation Forum in Seoul, Korea. And about a month ago, we also had fourth UK-Korea Financial Forum. And we also sponsor many workshops and seminars. And I hope CIFC can collaborate more with UN ESCAP member countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shin, for this excellent presentation on CIFC and then financing for SMEs. For the developing countries, especially where focus is to promote SMEs, and in Bhutan we try to promote small and cottage industries as a means of enhancing domestic productive capacity and also employment generation. So financing SMEs continues to be a very important agenda item, and especially for strengthening financing for sustainable development, mobilizing resources for SMEs will continue to be very important, and the Korean experience, especially different types of financings being made available to the SMEs, will serve as a very important experience for the member countries. Thank you very much, Mr. Swan. Now, before I conclude this panel discussion, I would like to thank Mr. Swan, Jiang Ping, Mr. Bhakti, and Mr. Shin for your excellent presentation. Before I conclude, I would like to request the distinguished delegations to give a big hand to these distinguished panelists for their excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Now I would like to thank our eminent panelists for having shared their valuable perspectives. Thank you very much. May I invite all panelists to return to their reserved seats and kindly request the chair of the committee to return to the rostrum. Thank you very much.
So thank you once again to His Excellency Mr. Nim Dorji, Finance Secretary, Ministry of Finance, Bhutan, for moderating the panel. Thank you also for the high-level panelists with a high-level presentation. I'm sure all of us trained our necks. So I would now like to open the floor to statements from the delegations. And as before, the statements will be read in the order in which they have been received by the conference officer. And I would like to urge the speakers to please maintain the discipline of the 5-minute time allocation so that all delegations may have enough time to deliver their statements. And again, speaking order will be statements from the members, then the associate members, permanent observers, followed by statements from designated representatives of UN bodies and specialized agencies of intergovernmental organizations, and then followed by statements from representatives of non-governmental organizations, if time permits. So I see there are now a number of countries that have registered to make their presentation. First, I'd like to call on the distinguished representative from Fiji. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor again. The delegation would like to acknowledge the important work ESCAP is doing in the area of strengthening finance for sustainable development in the region. Without finance, we don't possess the means to achieve the sustainable development goals. It requires innovation and innovative solutions to access the much needed finance, particularly countries with special needs. At the outset, my delegation fully supports ESCAP's ongoing work to support the global financing for development agenda and regional follow-up within the United Nations system. Secondly, strengthen the regional high-level dialogues on financing for development and aligning them with the committee sessions on biennial basis. Thirdly, prioritize policy research and knowledge products. Strengthen advisory services and capacity building. Support regional financing for development networks and partnerships. And establish a working group on small and medium-sized enterprise financing in Asia and the Pacific, which would prepare detailed studies in selected countries of the region and which would report to the committee as it's the second session. Let me turn to the important emerging work which we see as ESCAP's significant contribution to the fight against climate change. And that is the area of climate financing. While discussion continues on the organizations that own this work, Fiji sees this from a partnership perspective, which requires all hands on deck. No organization or agency can do this work alone. It requires appreciative dialogue, enhancing appropriate systems or synergies. We therefore commend ESCAP for bringing this important piece of work to the forefront of its development agenda. Accessing climate finance is fraught with many challenges. These challenges can be overcome in part if vulnerable countries such as Fiji are given the appropriate institutional support within their own niche areas by organizations such as ESCAP. We need to look beyond institutional boundaries and territories because transboundary problems require transboundary solutions. The need for innovative financing solutions to mitigate against and adapt to climate change promoted Fiji to become the first emerging market to issue a sovereign green bond raising Fiji $100 million, which is equivalent to US 50 million. At the request of Fiji's Reserve Bank, the World Bank, and the International Finance Corporation, IFC, provided technical assistance to assist the government in issuing the sovereign green bond. This collaboration took place under a broader 3-year capital markets development project supported by the Australian government. Through this partnership, Australia and the International Finance Corporation are helping stimulate private sector investment, promote sustainable economic growth, and reduce poverty in the Pacific. Projects financed from the Fiji Green Bond will follow the internationally developed Green Bond principles and will focus primarily on investments that build resilience against the impacts of climate change. The first bond has been issued, and the Fiji government has received overwhelming interest from domestic and international investors. Through partnership, Fiji has demonstrated its ability to test the waters and indeed test the market as it looks beyond borders and boundaries. Such bold actions could be sustained through, among others, the continued support work of ESCAP. Together, we must leverage and mobilize funds for climate finance. We also see it as development finance because many developments now must transition towards low carbon and climate resilient development. Fiji's COP23 presidency continues the push for this in Bonn, and my delegation feels that it must be raised here in support of ESCAP's broad work on climate change. As I have raised in my previous intervention, we must remain ambitious to deliver an ambitious agenda which requires partnership at all levels, global, regional, and national. I thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Fiji. May I now call the distinguished delegate from Sri Lanka.
Madam Chair, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me note at the outset that Sri Lanka's Ministry of Finance led the 4th high-level Financing for Development Regional Forum, co-organized with UN ESCAP, where most of these issues were discussed, including in areas such as domestic resource mobilization, infrastructure financing, capital markets, and financial inclusion. With that, let me address the issue at hand, taking into consideration Sri Lanka's experience. In Sri Lanka's case, although the last decade, we've been maintaining public investments at around 5% of the GDP, the infrastructure gap is significant with investment demands in the next decade or so into the energy, water, and highway sectors alone at around $40 billion US. In this context, Sri Lanka has embarked on a multi-pronged strategy, which, while is centered around improving the fiscal space through both revenue enhancements and expenditure controls, complemented by an aggressive reform program of laws, systems, and procedures, two key policy actions we are keen to drive financing strategies of sustainable development are by encouraging private-public partnerships and the development of capital markets to mobilize funding for infrastructure development. Madam Chair, Sri Lanka has been utilizing PPP modalities to meet its infrastructure demands in the past, and there's renewed interest to exploit PPPs as a means to meeting the infrastructure demands, more so given that the demands now is not for example, rural road networks, but a tolled expressway or a LRT, in a sense, those of a middle to an upper income country. To this end, a special unit dedicated to PPPs have been established under the Ministry of Finance. We are also in the process of drafting the enabling legislation and the procurement procedures to facilitate PPPs. Given our experience, we are also mindful that PPPs must be managed carefully, for otherwise it runs the risk of creating fiscal liabilities directly and indirectly through the issuance of guarantees, gap financing contracts, etc. While capital markets have the potential to provide the necessary funding to meet the infrastructure gaps at a competitive price, its role in Sri Lanka has not been up to its potential. The equity markets are not yet a good reflection of the economy, and the bank financing still dominates debt markets. We believe the underperformance of the capital markets is not only because the capital markets have remained underdeveloped, but also because the market perception of government policies of most developing countries have been less than flattering. In the last 2 to 3 decades or so, governments in the region, as is Sri Lanka, failed to implement reform agendas as quickly as it was expected and in the manner required. The socio-political considerations that has restrained governments from treating utilities as commercial ventures has also made investors reluctant to make investments despite the capacity to do so. At the same time, weak regulatory frameworks have allowed the markets to behave irrationally, with players engaging in anti-market practices, thus creating a sense of distrust amongst stakeholders. It is perhaps heartening to note that in Sri Lanka, in the next 6 months, we will be introducing a revised Securities and Exchange Act and a new Demutualization Act. It is envisaged that the demutualization of the Colombo Stock Exchange will create more credibility and transparency, thus attracting both domestic and foreign investors. We also believe that the recent government decision to divest non-strategic assets such as hotels and hospitals and even systemically important state-owned banks will help to deepen the capital markets, creating the much-needed liquidity in the markets. This will help mobilize funding in a more economical, effective and efficient manner into the most needed sectors of the economy, thus meeting the infrastructure demands. Madam Chair, we acknowledge the work undertaken by the UN ESCAP and believe that more analytical work is needed on PPPs, especially in understanding the fiscal impacts of PPPs and the design and implementation of PPP contracts, mitigating potential significant fiscal burdens and contingent liabilities that may arise. At the same time, we believe that UN ESCAP is uniquely positioned to support the region to better coordinate the regulatory frameworks and authorities in capital markets, which could be supported also by the exchange of expert views of practitioners as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, distinguished delegate from Sri Lanka. May I now call the distinguished delegate of India to please take the floor.
Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. At the very outset, I would like to place our appreciation on record on the hard work and exemplary dedication shown by the Secretariat in preparing the background notes and reports for this meeting. India takes note of the ESCAP's agenda for strengthening finance in the region for sustainable development. The 4 priority areas are the increasing domestic revenues by improving the public finance and tax policies, increasing private sector engagement in infrastructure financing, expanding financial inclusion and financing SMEs, and enhancing the provision for climate finance. Government of India fully supports the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Now I would like to focus on the Indian experience. The tax to GDP ratio in India is about 16.5%, which is lower than that of developed countries. There is room for boosting domestic resources by expanding the tax base as well as improving tax compliance. Over the last 3 decades, focus has been on lowering both direct and indirect taxes, making the tax laws and structures simple and enhancing revenues through higher economic activity. The current strategy is to move towards further formalization of livelihoods and incomes through steps like promoting digital economy, inclusive financial system, automation of tax collection and audit systems. There has been many attempts to improve to put in place a simple, predictable indirect tax system. We were making efforts for the last 10 years to have this implementation of goods and services tax. In this year, the 1st of July 2017, we have started implementing the GST. So this will help in a big way to improve our tax base and to make way for a common national market. To achieve the goal of financial inclusion to all, we have launched a Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, one of the financial inclusion programs in the world in 2014, to ensuring access of masses to the essential financial services, including banking, credit, insurance, and pension. Under this program, around 300 million new accounts have been opened so far. By leveraging this scheme, Aadhaar, that is the biometric system, and the mobile telephony, the government has dispersed a significant amount to beneficiaries through DBTs, direct benefits transfer system. In terms of SME financing, Government of India has been supporting SMEs in a significant manner. one of the strategies is to promote innovations through startup companies and funding them. In terms of physical infrastructure, roads, railways, civil aviation and waterways, in all these areas rapid expansion is coming in a rapid expansion is being done. Road connectivity and electricity are being brought to all villages. The broadband network initiative, the Bharat Broadband Network Initiative aims to provide high-speed broadband connectivity to all villages in the country. Over the last 5 years, there has been consistent growth in installed electricity generation capacity. Madam Chair, there has been significant participation of private sector in infrastructure financing in India. The initiatives taken by the government to boost investment in infrastructure finance include launching of innovative financial vehicles like infrastructure debt funds, a real estate investment trust, infrastructural investment trust, a national infrastructure and investment fund, laying down a framework for municipal bonds and its issuance, allowing complete pass-through of income tax to security trusts. Mainstreaming of public-private sector partnerships, relaxation in external commercial borrowings and FTM norms are the steps taken to promote infrastructure funding. Then I'm coming to the issue of the climate change, climate finance. The climate actions will have significant resource implications, especially for a country like India. India's climate actions have been largely financed from domestic sources. Innovative taxes like Swachh Bharat, that is Clean India Cess, or Clean Energy Cess, have been used in the past to mobilize public resources for improvement of climate and moving towards sustainable development. Currently, Clean Environmental Cess is applicable on fossil fuels with a view to reduce carbon emissions. India has ambitious climate actions in place. Preliminary domestic requirements to implement national climate plans adds up to more than $2.5 trillion between 2015 and 2030. Substantial scaling up of these plans would require greater resources. Developing countries like India are resource constrained and are already spending enormous amounts on climate change. Implementing climate change mitigation and adaptation actions would require domestic and new and additional funds from developed countries in view of the resource requirement and resource gap. While working towards revitalizing the global partnership for achievement of SDGs, India reaffirms the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. India therefore reiterates that the developed countries have an essential obligation to provide financial assistance to the developing countries, especially for global public goods such as climate change mitigation and control of pandemics, so that they can fully achieve the SDGs. We will be meeting our full commitments which we agreed in the Paris Declaration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you to the delegate from India. May I now request the distinguished delegate of Bhutan to please take the floor.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, let me express my appreciation to ESCAP for successfully organizing the first section of the Committee on Macroeconomic Policy, Poverty Reduction and Financing for Development. The session provides an excellent opportunity for timely review and update progress made in implementing Agenda 2030 for sustainable development in Asia and Pacific. Being a developing country, strengthening financing remains critical for Bhutan to achieve the SDGs. Let me briefly share Bhutan's experiences on strengthening financing for sustainable development. The tax to GDP ratio on average is about 14%. However, it will be a challenge to sustain the ratio without major reforms in taxation. Presently, reforms in tax collection through online revenue administration system has been introduced. This has helped to reduce revenue leakages and provide prompt taxpayer services. Further, the government has initiated preparatory works for introducing major indirect tax reform, that's introduction of GST, which is a broad-based consumption tax. Upon introduction, it's expected to broaden the tax base and enhance revenue collection. Further, to reduce cost of transaction, the government has embarked on initiatives of promoting e-payment and also e-government procurement. Recognizing the importance of investment in infrastructure to accelerate socio-economic development and in harnessing private sector resources, government has also approved the PPP policy in 2016 and rules and regulations very recently. This is already providing opportunity for private sector engagement in contributing towards building public sector infrastructure. Presently, we are mapping the fiscal risks of promoting PPPs. In this regard, we'd like to acknowledge the substantial work done by ESCAP. Government is also taking initiatives to promote financial inclusion to help achieve poverty reduction, especially in the rural areas, through enhanced access to suite of financial services. In addition, priority sector lending guidelines have been issued to promote SME financing. Since capital market is very important, initiatives are underway to develop a robust domestic capital market for raising market-based financing to meet the development financing needs. Support of ESCAP has been requested in this area, and we are very looking forward to work very closely with ESCAP. Bhutan remains committed to strengthening the ways and means to enhance domestic resources. However, without structural transformation of our economy, domestic resource mobilization has its own limitation. Further, Bhutan has been identified to graduate from LDC status, which may gradually lose access to ODA and concessional financing that may increase pressure on domestic resources for achieving the goals. Therefore, tax reform, capital market development, SME financing, climate financing, and new financing windows, we would require support for capacity development and analytical works. In order to strengthen financing for sustainable development and achieve the SDGs, continued support of regional agencies like ESCAP would be very critical. As such, ESCAP is requested to support our initiatives in domestic capital market development and PPP. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the distinguished delegate of Bhutan. It used to be the case that when we talk about financing for development, it's really the province of government financial institutions. But now we're talking about so many sources of financing. We're talking about capital markets, we're talking about PPPs, international financial institutions. But with this broad-based sources of financing also is the need for more sophistication and the greater need for capacity building as well. So may I now call the distinguished delegate of Thailand to please take the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, Honorable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, Thailand has kept financing for development as a high priority in our national agenda for many years. Yesterday, our Finance Minister, Tanti Worawong, delivered his keynote address on Thailand 4.0 growth model, which emphasized on promoting and integrating digital technology into finance system to increase financial inclusion, enhance efficiency in financial infrastructure, improve business competitiveness, and crystallize government services to public. We believe that our government with strong commitment can also make use of the evolution of digital technology to steer the economy towards achieving SDG or Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Today, I would like to share with you two more stories of our work, which are: one, our policy on domestic resource mobilization or DRM and effective spending, and two, our works on empowering SMEs and startups. On DRM, revenue enhancement is critical for every developing country that would like to achieve SDGs by 2030. For Thailand, our measures emphasize on expanding tax base and improve efficiency in revenue collection. To expand our tax base, we need to be able to trace where the taxable income would potentially be. The use of the single ID for banking, tax, education, and other purposes for each individual person is one of the key success for government in synchronizing big data and link it to the tax system. In addition, e-payment are mechanism to motivate the cash-based informal businesses to move into taxable umbrella. A rise in revenue should go hand in hand with a stronger capacity in effective public spending. Thailand just completed the first phase of welfare registration scheme where we collect data of low-income earners based on self-declaration and use the data to support the policy for formulation to targeted group. Example of policy which targeted beneficiary within geographic area within certain income bracket are such as monthly allowance for low-income earners, food coupon, transportation coupon, allowance for disabled person, and etc. The collected data would also help government in identifying and setting plans to improve skill of low-income earners and support their future employments. On SME, realizing the widening gaps in income redistribution, the Thai government has put greater effort to enhancing productivity for the SME and agricultural sectors to grow further through greater crowding in of private sector for development. Using tax incentives as a tool, large companies can enjoy 200% expenses deduction on their spending to support or monitoring SMEs. In addition, any investment in rural infrastructure is also 200% deductible when filing corporate income tax. The Thai government also provides concessional financing for SMEs and startups through specialized financial institutions. These concessional loans are such as SMEs transformation loan, which aim to turn around old-fashioned SME into those that respond to the Thai 4.0 strategies, and SMEs productivity improvement loan, which aim to upgrade modernize the production process. Moreover, to leverage risk from SMEs and startups, the Thai Credit Guarantee Institution provides loan guarantee to micro entrepreneurs, SME, new and innovative businesses so that they can have access to credit from commercial sources. That said, with such incentive for private sector, the government could promote inclusive growth and achieve SDG at a faster pace. On partnership among public-private people, the Thai government introduced Pracharat policy approach in which the government, private enterprise, and local community could work together to revive the local economy and to strengthen local entrepreneurship. Earlier this year, we established 76 so-called social enterprise for every province in the country to strengthening the existing top business model. At the end of 2016, Thai government has approved income transfer support for 66,337 village funds at the transfer amount up to 500,000 baht each. That said, the said fund provide real income reimbursement totaling 26.48 trillion baht, around 827 million US dollar, to the hands of the villagers. This new approach is rural development. In rural development, we ensure the growth, sustainability, income redistribution to all Thai. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude my remarks, we strongly believe that the inclusive and equitable growth path require collective action among all of us here today and all international organizations. With the lead of ESCAP as the knowledge sharing and policy formulation platform, we will win this fight against inequality together as one global good community. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the distinguished delegate from Thailand for presenting yet another innovative way of financing for development, allowing up to 200% tax deductible for certain development infrastructure. May now request the distinguished delegate from Pakistan. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset I would like to congratulate the well-deserved election of the Chair and Vice Chairs for the session of the Committee on Macroeconomic Policy, Poverty Reduction and Financing for Development. I hope under your able guidance the committee would lead to a successful conclusion. I would also like to appreciate the efforts of the ESCAP Secretariat in preparing the important documents for this session of the committee. According to UN reports, in the Asia-Pacific region, more than 1.4 billion people still live on less than $2 a day, which is an indication of lack of development and the level of efforts required to raise their living standard. The region's population is expected to reach more than 5 billion in 2050, which needed huge resources to provide them better social and economic opportunities. At sub-regional level, South Asia is host to 1/4 population of the world, and that has been the least integrated, less developed, and prone to most natural disasters. In our quest to achieve sustainable growth, increase resource efficiency and management, a global multi-stakeholder partnership approach led by the governments and supported by international financial institutions is imperative. The source and consistency of development finances will be a decisive factor for achieving sustainable development goals. Inclusive finances strives to enhance access to financial services for both individual and micro, small, and medium-sized and macro-level enterprises. In developing countries, access to financial services is crucial to strengthen financial sector and domestic resource mobilization and can therefore make a significant contribution to social and economic development. There is a need to implement the commitments made in the Addis Ababa Action Agenda and Sustainable Development Goals. Pakistan recognizes Sustainable Development Goals as the greatest global challenge faced by the world today. Pakistan believes that Sustainable Development Goals can only be brought through a holistic approach by promoting pro-poor growth, creating employment opportunities, equality of accesses, and ensuring benefits to reach all at the grassroots level. At present, Government's Vision 2025 provides a comprehensive national long-term strategy for achieving inclusive growth and sustainable development. The government has taken many measures to advance Vision 2025. These include Poverty Alleviation Fund, a Sustainable Development Goals Monitoring and Coordination Unit in coordination with UNDP, the Prime Minister's Youth Program, which includes schemes such as business loan schemes, interest-free loan schemes, skill development program, and free laptop schemes, an agricultural package aimed at helping small and medium farmers through provision of direct cash support, soft loans, and introducing new technologies, and National Financial Inclusion Strategy 2015. Our government has focused on infrastructure and connectivity projects. Pakistan is focusing on upgrading and building of road, rails, and ports infrastructure alongside improvement of regulatory framework on connectivity through regional, bilateral, and multilateral transport agreements. Tax administrative reforms implemented during last few years led the growth in tax collection. We will work more to promote financial inclusion in coordination with ESCAP and other international financial institutions. I thank you all.
Thank you very much. We still have a number of countries that have registered their desires to deliver their statements. May I request everyone to please be concise. May I now call on the distinguished delegate from Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Taking into account the limited budget and Secretariat's capacity to maximize the benefits of ESCAP by focusing more important issues is critical for achievement of the SDGs in this region. In this regard, a number of possible additional activities are proposed in the document E/ESCAP/CMPF1/4. However, Japan believes that that strong support to the member states in the finance area can be realized only if the activities have clear focus and priorities based on the discussion in this committee. We would also like to express our concern if the Secretariat intends to create new forum or a new high-level meeting or very new activities. ESCAP already has a number of high-level meetings and ministerial conferences, as well as a variety of analytical and capacity-building activities, and some of them are very close. Clarification of such mandate and relationship with existing cooperation mechanisms and other works, and coordination with other relevant international organizations are necessary before moving further. We also doubt that ESCAP has clear mandate on climate finance. In addition, the document refers to the report of the Secretary General on repositioning the United Nations Development System. However, it is not appropriate to make reference to only very particular parts of the report, as that is not conclusion, but discussions are ongoing in New York. We should not prejudge the discussion and need to wait. Madam Chair, we believe that prioritization of the activities according to the needs of member countries, rather than expanding or increasing the activities, is needed for realizing effective cooperation on financing in this region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the distinguished delegate from Japan. May I now call the distinguished delegate of Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. As the host country of the third high-level meeting on financing for development, we think the key for implementing the 2030 agenda is in financing. An area where financing is especially important would be infrastructure. The Secretariat's paper states that the amount needed for infrastructure investment in Asia is estimated to be around $26 trillion US. Excuse me. The conventional bilateral and multilateral ODA is far from meeting this amount alone, and diverse financial methods such as guarantee, blended finance is needed to be activated to increase private sector engagement. The Korean government has also introduced a new type of concessional financing that utilizes both borrowings from the market and interest subsidy from the government. To add, many developing countries are highly interested in PPP scheme in supplying SOC these days. Often, however, the legal framework is not certain enough and many lack experience, which discourages private investors from entering these markets. The activities, researches, and policy advices carried out by ESCAP regarding PPP will be very effective in reducing these uncertainties and achieving sustainable infrastructure development in Asia-Pacific region. Lastly, another important agenda is promoting financial inclusion. In many countries, SMEs suffer from low financial accessibility despite their crucial role in boosting economy and creating jobs. The policy direction taken by the Korean government has been introduced in detail during the panel discussion, so I wish to conclude my comments here. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the distinguished delegate from the Republic of Korea. May I now call the distinguished delegate from the Philippines.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Ensuring adequate funds for development entails adequate financing for both the private sector and the government. The first key component, therefore, is ensuring that the domestic liquidity is available for private sector investment. For the Philippines, ample domestic liquidity and the healthy growth in bank lending continue to support investments and economic growth. Domestic liquidity grew by 14.5% in September of 2017, while bank loans, which increased by 21.1% for the same month, continue to flow into the country's production sectors. Crucial to smooth flow of liquidity is having an appropriate monetary policy stance that ensures price stability conducive to sustainable growth of the economy. For the private sector in particular, I wish to focus on financing for micro, small, and medium-term enterprises. The sheer size of MSMEs shows that this sector has been and shall remain to be the key driver of the Philippines' economic growth. For example, MSMEs account for 99.5% of the total number of establishments in the Philippines and have employed 61.6% of the total labor force. The programs to support the MSMEs have included the Magna Carta for MSMEs, which mandate that banks to allocate a certain percentage of their loan portfolios, and the Credit Surety Fund, as well as the microfinance programs of the governments, which I have already mentioned in my previous intervention, and I shall no longer go into detail into these two programs. Now, with respect to public finance, on the other hand, in terms of government investments, particularly on infrastructure, funding is expected to be sourced mainly through domestic sources of financing, along with increased revenues of the government. Even as the national government embarked on a massive infrastructure development plan termed Build, Build, Build that will spend 8.4 trillion pesos over the period 2017 to 2022, and will see infrastructure spending to GDP ratio go up from 5.4% in 2017 to 7.3% by 2022. We foresee that the fiscal deficit target will be manageable at 3% of GDP to be supported by reforms to generate the needed revenues. And therefore, the tax reform program is crucial and is aimed to maintain towards a simpler, more equitable, and more efficient tax system. I will no longer go into the details onto the components of the government's tax reform program, but this will be supported by rationalization of fiscal incentives, more effective tax collection, including the easing of bank secrecy laws, enhanced anti-money laundering legislation, reforms in the Bureau of Customs and the Bureau of Internal Revenue, and a more aggressive anti-tax evasion and anti-smuggling program. Madam Chair, the Philippines supports the assistance and capacity building efforts of ESCAP in matters of taxation, considering that revenues from taxation are crucial in financing and attaining sustainable development goals. We also support ESCAP efforts to coordinate with other international organizations such as the ADB and OECD, noting that such coordination is crucial in addressing the regional concern arising from recent developments in international taxation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, distinguished delegate from the Philippines. May I now call on the distinguished delegate from Timor-Leste.
Thank you, Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Timor-Leste, a country still under construction, forward-looking economic infrastructure investment are underway to facilitate and secure connectivity and mobility of people, goods and services. Modern roads, ports, airports, and special economic zones are being developed following international standards along the land border with Indonesia as well as with Australia in the future. Building this strategic infrastructure through public-private partnership, PPP, mechanism and establishing economic corridor is an important step for Timor-Leste promote trade and investment flows. To realize this, in Jan 2016, Timor-Leste government signed its first PPP modality with Bolloré, French company, to build and operate the first international port in Tibar Bay area, located in southwest of Dili. This project will support the government of Timor-Leste in financing the public investment component of the PPP, encourage private sector engagement and economic development while improving export opportunities for the country. Other initiatives also being taken by the government, such as since 2010, Timor-Leste, Australia, and Indonesia has established the platform from integrated sub-regional economic development between Timor-Leste, Australia, and called Timor-Leste, Australia, and Timor-Leste, Indonesia, Australia Growth Triangle. The objective of these platforms is to promote economic growth through the integrated development of the sub-region covering 3 countries, Timor-Leste, Indonesia, and Australia Northern Territory. Timor-Leste government has created the special administrative region of Okusi and established this special zone of social market economy. The objective is to promote the quality of life and well-being of the community, as well as to 1. Creation of the green belt in the suburban areas to supply local, domestic, and export. And 2. Market access or links to member countries of the G7+, the Community of Portuguese language countries, and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And C. Build Swai Airport being inaugurated last June 2017. The airports allow for increased national and connectivity and will promote the ongoing development of South Coast by supporting activities related to the petroleum and minerals, agriculture, and tourism. It will also assist in the delivery of services in areas such as health and security. This facility and associated development in South Coast reflect the government's commitments to support growth throughout the territory of Timor-Leste. Madam Chairman, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, to end my delegation, I would like to emphasize that need, 1, to develop a network on PPP and infrastructure financing to provide the regular platform where experts can exchange best practices, share their experience, and present research findings on infrastructure financing and offer capacity building. And 2, prepare national study on SME financing in selected countries of the region in partnership with key regional and global stakeholders working on financial inclusion. 3, strengthen cooperation with regional and global stakeholders on tax matters for improved dialogue and collaboration with a focus on regular knowledge sharing, mechanism, and capacity building, particular for countries with special needs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, distinguished delegate from Timor-Leste. May I now call the distinguished delegate from Russian Federation. You have the floor, sir.
Спасибо, госпожа председатель. Моя делегация выражает признательность секретариату за качественно подготовленный документ E/ESCAP/CMPF1. В нем адекватно и подробно проанализированы различные стратегии и варианты финансирования развития, в том числе за счет внутренних налоговых и бюджетных ресурсов, финансирования развития инфраструктуры, государственно-частное партнерство, а также за счет развития финансового рынка, в том числе региональных рынков капитала, при участии многосторонних финансовых институтов. Финансирование развития является сферой, в которой принимает участие большое число многосторонних партнеров. В данном случае странам-членам ESCAP следует стремиться к тому, чтобы не допускать параллелизма и дублирования работы этих структур. Только таким образом мы можем обеспечить эффективное использование имеющихся на рынках капитала инвестиций средств. Мы высказываем здесь поддержку опасениям, высказывавшимся в частности делегациям Японии и Филиппин, и также призываем внимательно смотреть на внедрение новых форматов работы с тем, чтобы они не пересекались с существующими, давали бы эффективную, ощутимую отдачу и не приводили к распылению средств. С учетом всех этих обстоятельств Российская Федерация считает возможным поддержать предложение об учреждении под эгидой ESCAP Азиатско-Тихоокеанской сети государственно-частных партнерств и экспертов в области инфраструктурных инвестиций. Saying in English, Asian Pacific Network of National Public-Private Partnership Units and Infrastructure Financial Specialists for Knowledge Exchange and Peer Learning. So we support this initiative. But under the condition that we should first-hand analyze budgetary consequences, we should define clearly its mandate and implications for the work of Commission. So we hope that if this committee takes such a decision, endorsement, this new structure, we would soon get a document fully elaborating on implications for the work of the Commission, or delegations here and member state. The same applies equally to the international Intergovernmental Working Group on Financing Small and Medium Enterprises in the Asia and Pacific. We deem that such a structure would be a useful analytical body that would complement our annual dialogue of high level on financing development, which would retain the status of a major expert platform for corresponding thematic discussions reporting directly to this committee. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much to the distinguished delegate from the Russian Federation. I agree, truly, this subject of financing for development is very, very broad, and there really is a need to focus. But yes, your observation is correct that there's lots of interest on PPP, especially for infrastructure financing, and I think there are a lot of experiences and lessons that can be learned within the region. So, may I now call on the distinguished delegate from China.
谢谢主席女士，各位代表、各位同事。发展筹资是落实2030年可持续发展议程的重要手段。发达国家应兑现官方发展援助承诺，从资金、技术、能力建设、减免债务和开放市场等方面帮助发展中国家。 发展中国家应深化南南合作，联合自强。我们愿表达以下3个看法：一是坚持共同但有区别的责任原则，发挥南北合作的主渠道作用，推进南南合作，丰富发展资源。第二。 推进创新性筹资，拓宽资金来源渠道。正如刚才许多成员提到的，发展筹资中一个很主要的方式就是通过政府和社会资本合作。我们支持 ESCAP 发挥政策协调的平台作用。 尽早建成亚太区域政府和社会资本合作网络， 中国在政府和社会资本合作方面具有丰富和成功的经验。刚才财政部 PPP 中心的焦小平主任也在台上做了很好的介绍。我们也愿与各国进一步分享这一方面的经验。第三，是推进全球经济治理，为发展中国家营造良好的国际发展环境。各位同事，中国是全球发展合作的积极参与者、贡献者。中方设立的中国联合国和平与发展基金、南南合作援助基金已正式投入运行。资金融通也是“一带一路”的优先合作领域。亚洲基础设施投资银行、新开发银行等机构也为广大发展中国家带去了更多发展机遇和选择。中国愿继续推动发展筹资国际合作，实现区域的共同发展和繁荣。谢谢主席女士。
Thank you very much, distinguished delegate from China. And I now would like to call on the distinguished delegate from Bangladesh. You have the floor, sir.
Madam Chair and distinguished delegates from different countries. It's for your information that Bangladesh is the 44th largest economy in the world in terms of GDP and 32 in terms of purchasing power parity. And we have a very visionary goal to reach the status of middle income country by as early as 2021. And Bangladesh stands now on a solid ground to take the challenges of sustainable development goals achievement. And for this, the government identified some priority areas that are boosting revenue administration, manufacturing and export diversification, environment and climate change, gender equity and empowerment, improving investment climate, private sector and NGO participation, particularly in achieving sustainable development goals, improving human resource and formulation of ODA and international cooperation policy. And among the development priorities, a key concern is in the microeconomic areas, that is Bangladesh's low tax revenue to GDP ratio, and which is 9.8% of GDP, which is low even by the standard of South Asian countries. To finance this growing requirements of higher public spending on infrastructure, human development, social protection, and environment for inclusive and sustainable development, more attention is necessary, and we sought technical cooperation from the ESCAP and for the capacity development of the revenue administration of Bangladesh. And in the context of international cooperation and financial arrangement, we also sought cooperation from ESCAP, particularly in the area of ODA management and trade management. And I am sure that it would be very essential for achieving the sustainable development goals for Bangladesh. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much to the distinguished delegate from Bangladesh. May I now call on the distinguished delegate from Samoa. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Samoa recognizes that mobilizing adequate financing for sustainable development will be a challenge for all countries, but will be particularly difficult for Pacific small island developing states, where financing needs for sustainable climate-sensitive development are estimated to be among the highest in the world when measured as a proportion of national output. In light of this, there is a keen interest amongst all Pacific small island development states in exploring the potential of innovative finance schemes such as the green or blue bonds in the Pacific as a means to source new and additional funds, particularly for environmental interventions. I guess our neighbor Fiji has already disembarked on this, and we will for sure ask for their experience to share within our Pacific neighbors. I therefore wish to reiterate the importance of providing sufficient resources via ESCAP and multilaterals to implement the SDGs and desire more pathway to tackle climate change and ensure sustainable development efforts up to 2030. Madam Chair, thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, distinguished delegate from Samoa. Again, thank you for highlighting the different, the very difficult challenges being faced by small island states, particularly with respect to climate change and natural hazards. And this is really where we need international cooperation for financing for development as well as for disaster risk financing. May now call on the distinguished representative from Afghanistan. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I would like to comment and suggest on 5 areas relating to financing for development. First, tax policies and implementation. There should be clear links between tax policies with public spending in order to increase transparency and accountability and to increase social and legal pressures of tax beneficiaries on those who are reluctant to pay their taxes. Earmarking of some taxes with public spending, for example, smoking tax with public health expenditure can be effective for sustained development. Strengthening institutional capacities of economies to collect tax in a transparent and accountable manner, particularly in LDCs, is essential. Corruption is widespread in customs, tax collecting offices, as well as bribe giving by taxpayers to tax collecting offices in my country. We call for sharing of regional experience, including technology innovation, to mitigate the risk of corruption in tax collection. Second, SMEs. There is little knowledge about SMEs and the ways to support them in LDCs. Afghanistan requests ESCAP support to conduct national studies in selected countries of the region in partnership with the key regional and global stakeholders working on financial inclusion. Third, regional cooperation. I doubt if there is adequate knowledge and experience about the establishment of free zones between neighboring countries in the region. I request ESCAP to assess this and come up with some policy recommendations. This initiative may improve regional cooperation, including regional financing for development and benefit all participating countries. Fourth, financial gaps for development. Assessing the financial gaps for implementation of the SDGs, especially in low developing countries, is crucial. We request for ESCAP support not only for assessment of the gap, but also for advocacy to fill these gaps through regional and international assistance. And fifth, structure and functions of PPPs. Though PPP is a sustainable financing mechanism for creation of infrastructure and provision of services with social benefits, there are weak institutional capacities, structures, and ineffective functioning of PPP units in LDCs, including Afghanistan. Therefore, we request ESCAP to provide technical assistance and capacity building on PPP institutionalization. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the distinguished delegate from Afghanistan for proposing an organizing framework for the future work of the committee. May I now call on the distinguished delegate from the ADB. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. ADB is working with the aim to poverty reduction by providing loan, grants, and technical assistance in Asia and Pacific regions. The Sustainable Development Goals is a top priority for ADB and our member countries, as it requires some long-term macroeconomic policies and urgent and sustainable financial resources. The rising tax revenues pose many challenges for developing countries. The specific challenges include the weak tax administration, low taxpayer morale and compliance, corruption, a small tax base, and the missing reciprocal links between tax and public and social expenditures. In this context, the broad-based dialogues on tax matters, targeted and well-coordinated capacity buildings are important elements of collective effort. In Asia and the Pacific, a collaboration mechanism among the different stakeholders and the information platform for tax policy research and debate and capacity building programs are not yet in place. So ADB and ESCAP has started initial cooperations on this front. We look to further advance our cooperation with ESCAP on tax matters and work with ESCAP to take leading role in supporting regional and tax dialogues and capacity building as two Asia-based regional organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the distinguished delegate from the ADB. May I first call on the distinguished delegate from Nepal before I call on the other one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of my delegation, I would like to express my sincere gratitude and thanks to ESCAP for successful organization of this very important meeting and providing me this opportunity to make this statement. Again, I thank to ESCAP for working with the government of Nepal on conducting the Nepal National Study on Infrastructure Financing Strategies for Sustainable Development. The findings of the report are really useful for us in improving the infrastructure financing strategies for sustainable development in an effective way. The government of Nepal happy and looking forward to work with ESCAP in all the similar analytical works and capacity development activities in the future. Madam Chair, in Nepal, we have identified about 21 national pride projects on infrastructure, mainly roads, international airport, irrigation, and hydropower, and among others. So financing for development of the projects along with other regular projects is critical. Also, financing for post-earthquake reconstruction, new construction and rehabilitation activities are another challenges in the country. Post-recovery needs assessment estimates about 70 billion Nepalese currency additional resources to recovery from the heavy flood occurred in the southern part of the country this year. In Nepal, total revenue collection, revenue to GDP ratio is 23% it's for the last year, and tax to GDP ratio is about 19.5%. The entire balance of payment is supported by remittance inflow, which is raised to 695 billion Nepalese currency last year. The total public debt to GDP ratio is 26.8% as of last fiscal year. The fostering the PPP networks in the countries, especially in LDCs and LLDCs in our region, would be crucial in this regards. Government of Nepal is also going to establish a PPP center soon. The institutionalization of PPP center in National Planning Commission, Government of Nepal will connect with such platforms if ESCAP facilitates and coordinates us in this regards. Madam Chair, finally I would like to thanks, and it would be instrumental if ESCAP can make some analytical study, country-specific research work and capacity development workshops on strengthening the finance for sustainable development in LDCs and LLDCs and make recommendation for appropriate financing strategy in the countries of the region. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, distinguished representative from Nepal. Any other country who wish to deliver a statement? So if none, may I call now the distinguished representative from the United Nations Capital Development Fund.
Thank you, Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, Your Excellencies, and ladies and gentlemen. At the UNCDF, the United Nations Capital Development Fund, we strongly believe the Sustainable Development Goal can only be achieved if countries manage to build up strong SMEs. SMEs will have a leading role to play in meeting the most economic of the SDGs, promoting an inclusive and sustainable economic growth, employment, and decent work for all, which is Goal 8, as well as promoting sustainable industrialization and fostering innovation. SMEs can reduce income inequalities, which is Goal 10, if they are unable to provide good quality jobs. At UNCDF, our capital mandate and instrument, UNCDF offers last mile finance model that unlock public and private resources, especially at the domestic level, to reduce poverty and support the local economic development. Through our financial model through the channel, which is inclusive finance and working on the localized instrument. UNCDF look at SME not only from employment and equitable growth aspect, but also being a powerful enabler for the financial inclusion of households and individuals, including access to the basic goods and services. The SMEs in the areas of green economy, women and youth, food security and nutrition and infrastructure and services. And financial inclusion needs accelerated promotion and support. With the financial instrument of capital grants, loans, and grantees that UNCDF can issue to the private sector and any level of government, which is unique in the UN system, coupled with technical assistance and policy advice, UNCDF looks forward to the accelerated promotion and the strengthening of SMEs to address developmental and economic aspects. There's a need for the South-South triangular cooperation to address countries and the needs for the SME growth. With ESCAP's mandate, considerable constituency and resources, it is good to have the ESCAPs increasingly contributing to the SME agenda. UNCDF, with its capital and technical assistance mandate, looks forward to the further strengthened collaboration and joint work with the ESCAPs in providing support to both public and private sector on SME promotion and strengthening to achieve the last mile needs in the region. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I was just telling Ms. Tientip that this is my first time to hear about the UNCDF. So thank you for sharing with us the programs of the UNCDF. Are there any other delegations that wish to make any statement with respect to agenda item number 4? Okay, seeing none. So I would like to conclude this deliberation on agenda item number 4. And I thank all the representatives for your statements. And we shall continue with agenda item number 5. And may I request Director Adnan Aliani to... Okay. Okay. Thank you. I'll send it. Okay. So, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we'll now continue with agenda item number 5, consideration of the future focus of the sub-program as contained in E/ESCAP/CMPF1/5. And it is my understanding that Ms. Zeynep Orhun Girard, Program Officer, Strategy and Program Management Division, will briefly provide an update of the status of the preparation of the next strategic framework. And then this will be followed by Mr. Hamza Ali Malik, Director of the Macroeconomic Policy and Financing for Development Division, who will make some introductory issues on agenda item number 5. So, Ms. Zainab, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Distinguished delegates, colleagues,